And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Soul Survivor podcast. Me and Ryan back here to recap episode 1, the season premiere of Survivor season 44. What's up, Ryan? It's great to be back. Look, it's been a while since we did an episode recap, almost 3 months at this point. A little bit, they've been starting these spring seasons in March now. So, was used to a much shorter time between seasons. Took a little bit long, but we finally made it.
Dylan, I am happy to have a new season to talk about with you. Survivor 44, 22 years in. Look, I'll give Jeff credit. Jeff was hyping up the premiere, saying it was electric. The season's electric. It's a wild first 2 hours. I'm like, all right, Jeff hypes stuff up sometimes, and take it with a grain of salt. But he was right. This was a crazy first episode of the new season.
It was absolutely wild, like in every sense. I was telling people who didn't watch the episode yet, I was like, this was one of the more wild premieres I can remember in pretty much every way possible. Like, I also described this season so far through one episode. This season is like if Kaoh Rong and season 43 had a kid. It's like it has the 43 format with like a lot of the crazy characters that 43 had. People kept saying 43 was a train wreck in terms of that. Like, it has that feel, but it also, has the Kaoh Rong feel in terms of how tough it's being on these players. So I'm excited to get into it. I'm excited to see if that trend continues or if we move away from that going forward. So, look, again, we got a lot to talk about. Before we get started here, just wanted to remind everyone who is watching live to like this video, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Follow us on all social platforms. Links will be in the description below shortly after. So feel free to do that. Really helps us out. And feel free, throughout the entire podcast to write in the live comments. We'll get to questions at the end, and I'm excited to get going. We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, look, you compare it to Kaoh Rong. I mean, Kaoh Rong obviously holds the record with 3 medical evacs. And while we only have 1 so far, I mean, this is the record for most visits in an episode. We tweeted this out. I mean, the doctor had the MVP in the night. I mean, that was just insane for the new guy.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people were like, who is this doctor? Like, he's new. We haven't learned his name, but like he's going off right now. Like, the guy, like you tweeted, guys, guy was putting up Wilt numbers last night. He was in every scene. It was absolutely crazy. Like, I don't even know where do you think we should start? Where should we start off? I could start off by telling you my story of watching this episode last night.
Yeah,
pretty wild. So wanted to apologize in advance for any details that I may have missed in this premiere, because last night I get back. I was working a hockey game in Philly, Flyers Rangers last night. So I was in Philly, back in New York right now, but I was there yesterday, and I get back to the hotel after the game. I'm like, all right, I recorded on YouTube TV, gonna watch it when I get back. And I had ordered food to the hotel, but my DoorDash was completely screwed up. Took like hours to come, and then I ended up canceling it. So like, I'm trying to deal with this DoorDash situation while I got the Survivor premiere on, and I kept like pausing, playing. So it took a little bit long to get through it, but we got through it. We, read some things, listened to some things today, and we're fully here. I'm ready to go, but I cannot be more excited for this season, and it, especially with the electric start it got off to. So
you asked me where we should start. I mean, like always, in case you're new here, for the new season, what we normally do for these recaps is we normally start with our headline, which is who got voted out at Tribal Council. We kind of go through the strategy of it. Was it the right move for the players involved? And then we go back to the start and we go through things chronologically. And if there was ever a time, Dylan, to start with the Tribal Council headline, it's got to be right now, because if you all watched, Maddie gets voted out technically by a vote of 1-0. I mean, I'm going to read this out from Mike Bloom, because this is wild to me. The historical numbers that last night put up. Earliest idol play in U.S. Survivor history. Australian Survivor has its own records. First time a premiere that an idol nullified a majority of the votes. This is the first time that a majority of votes has been nullified since Natalie and Winners at War. It's been 4 seasons since a majority of votes got nullified. First time Shot in the Dark worked. First time half a tribe didn't vote, only 3 people voted. And the third time in Survivor history after Sandra and Lauren Rimmer that someone went home 1-0. So Dylan, I mean, what do you say to all that?
Look, I did not see. I saw the craziness coming because Jeff had said if he like released like a promo video on TikTok, I think, and he was like, "One thing I'll say about this, a crazy tribal council." So of course, I'm thinking to myself like, okay, Jeff is just hyping it up. Like maybe a guy plays an idol, but like I don't know, like how crazy could tribal council really get in the first episode? And I would say that it probably can't get crazier than that. Now, obviously, a lot of firsts, a lot of first time in a while happening. But let's get started with the curious cases in this vote. So we had Jamie playing her shot in the dark and Matt playing his shot in the dark.
Yeah.
What was going on there? What's your opinion on that? I mean, I was sitting there like I'll be completely honest. Like I was cracking up when Jamie played the shot in the dark. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like there's no way. And then Matt played it. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Now I have seen a lot of theories today about why Matt could have played the shot in the dark, whereas Jamie, it didn't seem as necessary. So I'm curious to see if you buy into those theories, if you want to talk about those theories, about why Matt may have played it, or if you just think that he just made the wrong move.
Yeah, so I think let's go individually. So Jamie, I think the episode clearly showed she was paranoid. And obviously this happens with a lot of first-time players and even returning players. I mean, in the first tribal council, when so much is up in the air, you don't want to be the first one out. You think you might be on the chopping block. Your paranoia might just take over you and you want to play your shot in the dark to secure your safety or at least take a shot at your safety. And I thought, and I still think it was not a great move. I think it signals to your allies that you're kind of doing the whole anybody but me and you're acting kind of self-interested, and maybe they don't want to work with you going forward if you're just going to go off the rails for some paranoia. I will give Jamie one piece of credit, though. Obviously, it worked. First time that it's worked, so good for her. Maddie, in her exit interviews, now Steven always says take it with a grain of salt because sometimes people might conflate things. But Maddie did say in her exit press that Jamie was one of the earliest names brought up. So Jamie had a reason at least to be paranoid. I still think she was a little hasty in using it. So that's why Jamie, I think, played her shot in the dark and it worked out for her. Matthew was the interesting one to me because, I mean, we can go over why he used it and was it right for him. People are suggesting, like the theories that you're saying, is that maybe he was using it to signal Brandon to play it. Because obviously if Brandon goes into tribal thinking he and Matthew are on the same page and Matthew plays a shot in the dark, Brandon's got to think, okay, well then I don't have my closest ally voting with me. Something is wrong. I should play my idol. Maddie also said in her exit press that she didn't see it, but she thinks Matthew told Brandon to play his idol, that he was tipped off in some way. But either way, whether Matthew told him or the shot in the dark tipped him off, it was clear to Brandon that something was going awry from what he had heard at camp.
Yeah, I'm trying to, the more I hear about the theories, the more I second guess of whether it was the right move to use the shot in the dark or not. I'm still leaning that it was not the right move to use the shot in the dark for Matthew. Obviously he didn't need it, but I'm also seeing the theories that say that had he cast a vote one way or the other, it's kind of just showing where you are. Whereas now he kind of buys himself another vote where nobody really knows where he stands. So it gives him another opportunity to kind of play the middle without being caught. Yes, that's true. But also like, is that overthinking too early in the game? Like, if you think about it really, and again, with Survivor, everything in the new era, especially changes so quickly. So it's like, had he, voted against Brandon, I think there's a chance that he could have gone up to Brandon after the immunity challenge and said, hey, I thought all the votes were going on you. That's why I told you to play, the idol. Like you saved yourself. I had to vote you to make it seem like I'm with them, but I'm really with you. Like he could have played it that way and still kept his shot in the dark. This just seems like almost like a cop out. And now it's like, nobody's mad at him, but at the same time, nobody knows where he stands. Right. So I think it is tough. To me, at the first tribal council, as nerve wracking as it may be, I think you have to make a stand. Right. You have to, I think, establish trust with somebody. Look, maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm interpreting this a different way, but to me, it's hard to see how he could have established trust by playing a shot in the dark. So again, and then if he had voted the other way and voted with Brandon, then again, I feel like there's just still ways out of it. Like at the end of the day, you have to vote a certain way. Like, so,
yeah.
yeah, I get that you don't want to be on the wrong side of the vote, but to me, it seemed like a little bit of overthinking. And let's not forget, like, I understand that the shot in the darks haven't worked at all, but like if you are ever in a situation where that's your only hope later in the game, like to me, you may want to have that, right? So I think it was probably unnecessary to use it at the first vote.
Yeah, and look, obviously, you don't. We see only a part of it, and we're not aware of all the conversations that are happening, especially in a small group of 6. I think everyone's name gets brought up at some point. I mean, we've heard this from other people in the new era that say, even if somebody wasn't like a big target and they were probably the safest among the 6, everyone's name gets brought up in a small group. It's only when you have tribes of 9 or 10 where it's really only a couple people's names that get brought up. But at some point, Matthew has to be thinking to himself, like, I think you're right. I think it's too cute to play your shot in the dark just to signal to Brandon to play his idol. I think Brandon probably was told by Matthew, hey, something's going down. You may want to consider playing it. I think the most likely explanation is, and we'll get to this in the episode, Matthew's injury. Maybe he's like, you know what? People might see me as a liability. Maddie doesn't want to go after the girls. If she wants to sacrifice a guy and Brandon's bigger than me, maybe I just got to play this in case they still think I'm injured with my shoulder. That's probably a good explanation. I think the interesting part of this as well is Lauren, because when you say, oh, it might be too early to try to like not play something and try not to have to vote to show your cards, it sounds like Lauren banked her vote, and we'll go over that advantage, because Maddie said in her exit press that Lauren came back from the island and told Lauren and Brandon about advantage, and apparently Lauren and Brandon were close, and Lauren's like, well, if y'all are going to vote out Brandon, I don't want to write his name down. And Maddie's like, I have enough votes. You don't have to write his name down at all. Like, you can just bank your votes, save it for later, and we have enough votes. Problem is that I don't think Maddie took into account both shot in the darks being played and Lauren not banking her vote. Like, that was just crazy how only half the people voted.
Yeah, and I want to bring up how well I think Lauren played this. It's like she had an excuse to not vote because she told everyone that she lost her vote, right? So it's like, you know, if she's, you know, coming back and not having a vote, there's a reason why people would lead her to believe that she lost her vote. And now no one's going to be suspicious of her, you know, having anything, because, you know, the stories match up, right? So I think that with this bank a vote or whatever they called it, I think it was, not only is it a good advantage, it's you know, if you play it correctly in terms of like how you played off to your tribe, I think it's kind of a pretty good way to get an extra vote without anybody noticing and anybody having any suspicion of you. So I think Lauren played this really well, and now she has an extra vote. So that's good for her.
I will give Maddie one piece of credit, because obviously, as we usually eulogize the people that got voted out, I mean, obviously we can say Maddie, maybe you could argue, played a little too hard here. But I have to give Maddie credit, like thinking about it more and also hearing her exit press, even though we said she's kind of, she's feeling herself. I think she does have a good mind for the game. Because if you think about it, Dylan, no one ever plays their idol the first episode ever. No one ever plays an idol that early. So I guess she didn't think that Brandon was going to do it. And even if Brandon was tipped off, hats off to Brandon for finding the idol and also playing it correctly. So good for him. Good start. Maddie got the whole tribe basically to agree before they play their advantages to vote out the alpha male, the biggest guy in the tribe, the guy that would help them the most in challenges. And like, basically, I'm not saying that he's Jonathan, but like voting out your version of Jonathan, essentially. She got everybody to agree to that. So I got to give her credit for getting the whole tribe on board. Her one biggest problem, and I cannot believe she did this, was that she went to Matthew. Now, she claims that she couldn't find Kane, and they only had a few minutes before tribal, and she wanted to make sure she had one more number. But in my mind, I'm like, you go to Brandon's closest ally, and you know he has an idol. This is going to tip him off so badly. So I think that was her one major flaw, that she should not have gone to Matthew there.
Yeah, I you know, it's also tough to, you know, target somebody who, you know, has an idol. Like, I mean, like, yeah. You know, like, and then, like you said, go to their closest ally about it. Like, well, I mean, this plan could pretty much easily get blown up. But one other thing I want to talk about, and I see a few people mentioning in the comments, is the one other part of this vote that we didn't discuss is the person who gets screwed here is Kane, because he looks like he's the only person left who voted for Brandon. Yep. So, and let me say, I don't think Kane will be in trouble, because like we seem to get like a decent amount of him. I know they happen to go to tribal council, but like we got a decent amount of him. I'm getting good vibes from him. I think he's really smart. I also think like and we spoke about this in the preview for the cast, based on like his, picture and just like the answers he gave, I was a little bit worried that he was going to like kind of be like an outcast or stand out from the tribe, because he, seems like a pretty big guy. And he's doing a really good job. I think he was making relationships. And I feel like my gut tells me that he's going to be good in this game, and I think he'll recover fine. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think because this vote, usually when we leave tribal council, especially early on, we say, okay, who's coming back to camp in a great position? Who was the winner of this vote? Who was the loser of this vote? And while I would say Brandon was the winner of this vote, it's crazy because, clearly if a lot of people were willing to write his name down, how does he regroup from here? I think Matthew still sees him as an ally because he'll help them in the challenges, of course. I wonder if Lauren still wants to work with Brandon, because it sounds like they had a close bond early on. I don't know where Kane stands. Kane could be in trouble now as the only person to have voted for Brandon, and Jamie seems like a wild card herself. So if Orange goes back to tribal council, I really couldn't tell you who I feel like is in the most danger, because I could probably point to a few people.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them flipping it on Jamie and being like, she's a loose cannon. She played her shot in the dark at the first tribal, and she's weaker in challenges. Like, let's vote her out. I could easily see that happening. I could also see them, maybe if it's somewhere closer to the merge, let's say they win a few few challenges in a row and don't have to go. If it's close to the merge, I could see them taking the big strike at Brandon. So we will see what happens, but that tribe is certainly an interesting one, and what a wild first tribal council it was.
Yeah, I think even though he's still recovering from his shoulder injury and his foot injury, I think Matthew probably is in a pretty good spot now, because I think he would have been included in on the vote, and he still has Brandon as his ally. And I think, like you just said, if people want to target Brandon now that he doesn't have an idol, they might just go for him again instead of Matthew. Jamie's the wild card. Kane was on the outs, and even though Lauren, I think, is pretty well situated, she did catch some flack for the lie that she told that we'll go into. But yeah, I think Matthew might be in the best spot on Orange right now.
Yeah, I think so. But we could get to the rest of the episode, because there is a lot to talk about. So we start out the episode with a interesting open, the Caroline confessional, where they showed us the Carolyn confessional, where they showed us the behind the scenes, which we have never seen before in an opening. And I feel like Survivor did a good job in this episode of kind of, for a first episode, kind of getting us acclimated and introduced to a lot of the characters. I feel like I already kind of know a bunch of them like decently well for the first episode. So I think that's something that they changed, especially from, like look at 41, which was a disaster in terms of that. I know you had mentioned that you thought that it was like a little bit maybe too advantage heavy, but I still think that they did balance out a good job of kind of showing most of the people. But I do also feel like there could have been less advantages, but we could get into that whole dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's obviously hard. It's the first episode. Even with 2 hours, you still have 18 people to introduce to us, especially, I mean, unlike us who did our homework and we looked at the cast bio, someone like, my dad or my sister who doesn't look into all of that stuff. I mean, this is their first time seeing these people. So it's tough to really give us a good taste of who everyone is 18 people deep. Now, again, I think you're right that we got to know a good amount of them pretty well. Like I could tell you, I know Carson, Carolyn, Yam pretty well. I know obviously Brandon and Matthew pretty well, and I can name a couple people. But there are some people like, and I think Jay is correct that everybody got at least one confessional, maybe two. I mean, but there are some people who we really just don't know yet. Like I don't know Josh that well. We didn't see a lot of Heidi because that tribe won a lot, and then. I think even though Sarah went to Advantage Island, I couldn't tell you anything about Sarah as a person or as a player, really. So, I mean, we are still learning these people. I think if you had less in terms of advantages and other things happening, it would be better, but it's just editing styles. I mean, I think every show does it differently. I mean, Australian Survivor, they showcase like their stars, and then like everyone else gets like a little bit here and there, and then they get more as time goes on, but it's just different ways of showcasing different people.
Yeah, for sure. And we have this challenge right out of the gate, as always, the reward challenge. And we had a few interesting things happen here. So first off, and this is what obviously everyone's been talking about, and probably the biggest story from this episode, outside of the tribal council, was Bruce, who bangs his head literally in the first second of the challenge, just strictly because he didn't go low enough to crawl into the thing. Has this huge gash on his head, clearly had a concussion, and eventually gets pulled from the game, that was brutal to see. I see a lot. There's a whole lot of debating about, they stopped the challenge. Was it the right, clearly, look, I'm not going to question anything that the medical people do at all. I think that clearly, as somebody who's had a concussion before, I know that, literally after the first day after I banged my head, or the first 12 hours, I was fine. And then, about a day later, I started popping up with headaches that I had for 2 weeks. So for, Bruce to have something like that, obviously you had to make sure that, he didn't have any internal, head injury, something that could have been even worse than a concussion.
Yeah,
so,
brain bleed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand the reason why they had to pull him at that point. And yeah, it's tough to watch. I think a lot of people had high hopes for Bruce. He was the first pick of our fantasy draft, which I mean, that's brutal. But the good news today is, I'm sure you heard, and I don't know if people watching have heard, but I did happen to listen to Jeff's podcast that he does now starting this season after, the episode ends every week. That's a new thing. He had Bruce on and he invited him back for a future season. So looking forward to the day that Bruce returns. I'm hoping that this is the perfect excuse for them to just make it a second chance theme. But yeah, that's good that he'll be coming back. But yeah, man, this was rough to watch. 12 hours out there. That's it.
I mean, my heart broke for him. I mean, again, as people who like you and I who are fans of the show, to go through the whole process, just to apply for the show, then to put your family on hold, to possibly quit or even leave your job for a period of time, to go through everything just to get injured in the very first or second obstacle, to get injured, and then to be out within 12 hours, not even make it a full day. My heart broke for Bruce. I mean, like you said, I'm so glad that Jeff revealed on his podcast that they're formally inviting Bruce back. Now, it'll be interesting to see for 45, 46, 47, the next few seasons, because Bruce left so early, you could just have a second chance season and have a lot of people come back and have Bruce be one of them for a second chance. You could also argue, if Jeff wants to build up more new rosters for a while and we don't see returnees for a bit, you could argue in a season or two, obviously Bruce has to accept the invite whenever he feels ready to come back. It won't be immediate, but you could argue they could have 17 new people in Bruce. I mean, Bruce technically is a new player himself. I mean, he doesn't have more than 3 days under his belt. So I think you could either have him in a full returnee season of second chancers with, your Jessies, your Shans, whoever, or you could just say, you know what, Bruce, this is let's scratch that. This is your real first season. It's kind of like Travis Etienne getting hurt in the preseason a year or two ago. So this past year was his first actual season. But you could do either way with Bruce. Either way, I'm glad he's okay. First of all, no brain bleed. But second of all, I'm glad that he's going to hopefully get his second chance soon, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And again, good to hear he was okay and everything like that. We also had, it was a pretty wild first challenge, and the fact that Tika the purple tribe was up by a lot. And then this is where we really get introduced to Carolyn. She's just tossing the pole, the thing up the pole, and literally couldn't get it up. But I was just sitting there. I was like, you gotta be kidding. I was like, this is unbelievable.
Well, Dylan, her pants were holding her back. She took her pants off.
I mean, and especially you saw how, I don't want to say easily, but kind of easily the other people did it. And I was like, oh man.
Well, I mean, okay, I felt bad. I mean, like when it came to some of the other women that she was going against, I mean, she didn't look great, but I felt bad. I mean, Danny and Brandon just did wonderful.
Let me ask, let me interrupt you here quick.
Yeah.
Was the other tribes were swapping out, so she could have swapped out, right?
No, so that's a good question. I don't know.
Or do you have to get one off before you swap off?
It looked like you had to get yours off before you swapped, because everybody else got theirs off at some point. No one else had to swap out. Now here's the problem though. It's if you look at that tribe, I mean, Bruce was obviously hurt. I mean, Carson would probably argue he's not the best person to throw it off the throw it off the pole, and you could argue how Yam Yam and Sarah and Helen would have done. But that tribe, I mean, obviously they're very intelligent, clearly, but they're kind of outgunned by green and orange. So I think even if they swapped out, I don't know if it would have mattered. I mean, Carson gave them a huge lead with the puzzle, but they couldn't compete with the Dannys or the Joshes or anybody else.
Right. And regardless, they lose it, but then they end up doing, and we'll segue this into Savvy or Sweat. They end up getting the Savvy challenge pretty easily, it looked like, and obviously they had the right person on their tribe to do the Savvy challenge. As Carson, the right people, I should say, Carson and Helen were extremely good at that. I got the right answer, so that was impressive because I they didn't show it as much as they showed like some of the other ones we've seen in the past. But I was looking at that thing, I was like, what? I was like, what in the world? So I would not have been, I don't think I would have been good at that, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, so with Savvy or Sweat, and look, I mean, we can get into this with the new era, but I feel like this is the fourth time in a row we're seeing Savvy or Sweat. Fourth time in a row. Listen, obviously the new era, Jeff is trying out these new things and he wants the players to experiment with them and really evolve the game in new ways, which I appreciate. I feel like we see the same thing over and over again. This is why we've been saying for 45 and beyond, we want things to shake up, whether that's tribe swaps, bigger tribes, returnees. We got to kind of move away from the formula. What I will say, though, is that it was interesting how with Green Tribe winning and then Orange getting second, so they got to pick Savvy or Sweat. At first, Dylan, I was wrong. I thought for sure they made the right choice because I thought, okay, well, it's physical challenge. You got 4 hours to do it. And by the way, I will say Savvy or Sweat this time, this may have been the hardest Savvy or Sweat we've seen because I was looking at the rules. I went back and compared it to the previous rules. Yes, you had 4 hours to complete the Sweat challenge. But Dylan, if you look at like a bar, not a bar graph, like a freaking line graph, it's like exponential growth here where it's like this gets harder and harder as it goes on because the weight gets increasingly tough and you're worn out at the end of it. So you have to have a really good start or else you're not going to finish in time. And then if you pick Savvy, Dylan, did you pick up on the fact that they only had, I knew they only had one guess, which makes it hard enough. Did you know they had 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's it. That's crazy.
I know this was it was simple. I mean, it was a pretty small little thing with the rings and stuff, and it was 18, but yeah, the triangles were harder, but they had like 2 hours for the triangles. I'm like, you have 15 minutes?
Yeah, and the Sweat was finished with literally like seconds left.
This was brutal this time, yeah.
Yeah, and let's in terms of the right decision being made or not made, let's keep in mind that the reason that the Orange Tribe Ratu ends up going to Tribal Council is most likely because they chose Sweat, right? Because you could make an argument that Brandon, and I think this is what they kind of said it on the show, like Brandon was so exhausted and like dehydrated from doing that he was not performing well and basically had to sit down at the end of the and had to see medical at the end of the challenge. And as a result, they were moving those were huge pieces and basically, that's one less person, your strongest player, a former NFL player who is now not moving the pieces. So it makes it harder to do the puzzle. And it basically was a chain reaction that led to them losing the immunity challenge. So I think that's something that if they keep doing the Savvy or Sweat thing, which I don't know how much longer they're going to do it at this point, because it's already been 4 seasons straight, so we'll have to see. But I mean, that's something that if they do it in the future, people should consider.
I think hindsight 2020, I think because of that reason, Ratu Orange should have chose Savvy. Now, granted, I think the biggest reason they didn't was because they probably didn't think they were equipped enough to handle the Savvy challenge. And even though giving it to Carson and Helen was the mistake because they were very good at that, I guess in my mind, it's like they should have just taken the Savvy. They probably were just scared of it because they only got one guess. And I think having only one guess in 15 minutes just scared them off of it. But imagine Purple doing that challenge because Bruce wouldn't have done it with his condition. Bruce was not going to do that. So who would you have had do it? Like Yam Yam and Carson, Yam Yam and Sarah? Like, I actually think that even if Orange had gotten theirs wrong, I don't even know if Purple would have finished if they had Sweat.
Yeah, I don't think they would have finished without Bruce.
Oof. Yikes.
But yeah, to move on to other stuff that happened in the episode that I would say is pretty relevant is Matthew. We saw the moment that they showed in the preview for the season, and that was Matthew climbing the rocks and falling on the rocks.
All right,
Let's just say,
tell me if this is a hot take, by the way, because Rob and Steven went at this on the know-it-alls last night, and I'm curious what your thought is. Yeah. Production's got to stop them from doing this. Like, you could argue Survivor's an adventure. You know, Colby and Lex and All Stars used to go cliff diving off the rocks into the water, and you know, Angelina's looking for idols on like mini cliffs and stuff. But like, there is no way, from a liability perspective, if Matthew falls and breaks his arm or hits his head and dies, like the show's over. Like, what do you agree that production should not let them do this? Like, when you are climbing that stone pillar and nothing is up there at all that you could use, like, should production even let Matthew do this in the first place?
So it's funny, Jeff literally, again, I don't know if you said you didn't listen yet to Jeff's podcast,
only
right?
Part. I didn't, not the whole thing, only parts.
So, okay. He actually addressed this in the podcast. He said, quote, "We're never going to stop somebody from doing that. We want people who are going to live out their adventure," like he said, which is, he's like, the only thing we'll do is send drones over to shoot the camera. I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Now, do I think he should be stopped? No. Do I think that he should have more intelligence not to do that? Yes. That was a crazy, careless moment. Like, what were you gaining from that? There was nothing to gain. So I think that you just got to be smarter when you and people made a good point. I think I was listening to another podcast and they said, you literally just saw Bruce get hurt in the first challenge. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I guess I see the point that you and Steven are making, which is like, look, if the Survivor's an adventure and you're out here to have an adventure, like, you can't really stop them from doing that. Granted, once someone gets severely injured, I think they will stop it then. But yeah, I guess that's fair if you want them to play hard and just explore and do things. But like, people are saying in the chats, he goes, "I'm going to go forage for stuff." Nothing's on top of that rock that you could use. Like, I don't know what he was thinking about going up there. Maybe he just wanted that full Survivor experience, like Ohio State says. But like, yeah, you just got to read the room, dude. Like, I mean, I love Matthew. I think Matthew will be fun to watch. But you just saw Bruce get hurt. I mean, your tribe clearly, there's confessionals of Maddie saying, you know, Matthew is leading our tribe right now. If he's not here, we're kind of screwed. You got to be smarter than that. And the crazy thing, Dylan, was that I saw his arm go into the sling after the medical came, and they were like, "All right, you know what, you're fine. But like, you know, keep your arm in a sling." I thought he was maybe going to go for a Tyson type of approach from Blood versus Water and kind of like nurse his injury and say, "Oh, I'm not that big of a threat. I'm going to kind of play it off and it's fine." But Matthew, I guess, just being the kind of guy that he is, there's a secret scene. We actually had two secret scenes, one with Matthew and one with Claire. We can get to Claire in a bit later. But Matthew was like, "I don't want to appear weak to my tribe. I want to show them that I can still do things if they need me to. And I don't want to appear weak to the other tribes because I don't want them to like know about like our dynamics, or I don't want them to think I'm on the outs or whatever his reasoning was." But I thought he was going to milk it, but it seems like he wants to get back to how he was right away.
Yeah, that's interesting. I probably would have milked it a little bit also, but like it is interesting, right? At the same time, you don't want to see, it's different because people had seen Tyson before, so they had preconceived assumptions of what he would be like or what he is. Whereas this, it's like, all right, he's a brand new player, so like there's no. Whereas Tyson, they could have like brought up like maybe some of them knew each other before season 27, and they were like, oh well, based on what I know about Tyson, I know I should keep him in the game no matter what. This, it's like, all right, well, if you do milk it a little bit, then people could just say you're a liability. Like, I could vote you out. I don't know you at all, right? So I think that it's a tough call for sure. I don't fault anybody anyway or what they would decide in that situation, but let's fast forward a little bit here to one of the bigger parts of the episode, and we kind of already talked about one of the advantages, but we had another journey in this episode, which we've had in pretty much every premiere in the new era so far. Actually, something we skipped. Actually, you know what? Before we get to the journey, let's talk about the
cage item,
the bird cage.
Yeah.
Okay, because we didn't talk about the bird.
So
cage.
Yeah, I want to ask you what. Oh, sorry. I think you froze. What did you say?
I said let's talk about the bird cage.
Bird cage, yeah. So I want to know what your thoughts on this are. Like, I saw this in the preseason. I saw Inside Survivor Martin Holmes say that this was going to be a new twist, that idols would be public and locked in their cages. I like it. I'm curious what your thoughts are, but I like this new shift to it. I think there's a lot of different.
Ryan froze, I believe. Let me see. All right, Ryan
Brown.
froze. Wait.
Am I frozen, or I think you're frozen on my screen?
Oh, maybe I was frozen. All right. Whatever it was, we lost connection for like a brief second, but I think we're back.
Okay.
We good now?
Yeah. I don't know if you heard my thoughts, but long story short, what are your thoughts on the cage idol?
Okay, cool. Hopefully connection's good from here on out.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that in terms of the cage idol, at first I texted my brother. So I was texting my brother like live updates as I was, watching the episode because he had watched before me. I told you I watched a little bit late. And my first instinct was to text him and be like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Like, what are they just putting idols out in the middle of it? And then I thought about it more, the way it played out, and I was like, I do like this, but let's talk about the situation that happened because I have a lot to say about that. And I'll just get started right away. So obviously, Brandon in the episode ends up finding the key. He was with Maddie, and Maddie, he tried to hide it from Maddie, but then Maddie kind of saw him, so he had to tell her. That caused like distrust between them. She didn't want him. She didn't want to work with him. He didn't want to work with her. It was like they kind of like begrudgingly spoke about it, right? And then he wanted to tell everybody else, and Maddie was like, "No, why would we tell everyone else? Can we keep it?" And then all of a sudden, he just yells and is like, "We found it." Now, let me just say, how many times in the new era are we going to watch people give away information that they don't need to give up? Like, I understand if maybe he figured that Maddie was going to tell everyone anyway. He may as well just tell everyone. But it's like, I mean, come on, man. That was brutal. And I'm sure, and he told us, he's like, I made a mistake. Once he pulled out that idol in front of everybody, and not only does it come with an idol, it has a fake one also. That's a powerful, powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I would have done, and we can discuss what you would have done, what you think Brandon should have done, etc. But here's what I would have done. If I had found the key, not only do I keep it to myself, okay, I would have opened it in the middle of the night when nobody was looking, okay? Then, and again, you don't have to do it right away. You could do it either, you could keep it to yourself, or obviously they went to tribal council, so it was in his best interest to open it. But I would have opened it in the middle of the night when nobody saw. Would have saw that it was an idol and a fake idol. I would have probably taken the fake idol. No, I would have taken the real idol in my pocket, left the fake idol in there, so it'll still look like something's in the bag. And then you relock it up to make it seem like it hasn't been touched. Now, I don't know more details about this. This is something you would have to ask the actual members of the cast. Is this like the type of thing that once you unlock it, it's just like open and you can't like relock it? Or is it like a lock that you can just like push shut again once you open it? Because if so, that's what I would do. And I'm so curious to see what happens on the other two tribes when they find the key. I swear, if these other two tribes tell everybody about it, I'd be like, come on, man. And you heard, I was hoping Kane found it because he's like, oh, I'm not opening it right away. Like I keep the key to myself. Like I don't want people to be sharing this information because, and I don't play when Brandon plays it and everybody knows it's coming is a lot less exciting than, somebody not knowing that the cage was opened and then boom, idols come out.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really interesting. I mean, granted, like you said, we don't know all the logistics. We don't know if you can relock it, if the lock won't fully close again so people can see it's been open. I mean, I forgot who it was, someone on Australian Survivor, I think, said they had something similar in their season and you couldn't physically close it again. So that's one thing. Number two is we don't know like if you can move the cage, is the cage like locked where it is? I agree with you. I think because it came with the fake one, the right move, if you get it by yourself, obviously Brandon was in the vicinity of Maddie. I think the right move is to lock up the fake one in there and you keep the real one and someone else happens to finds it or somehow breaks it open, they'll have a fake one. If it didn't come with a fake one, I was saying maybe like take the idol and fill the bag with rocks and lock it back up so they think it's still there, but it's actually gone. Either way, I'm really excited to see what happens with the other two tribes if they find it. I think Brandon, even though he says he made a mistake, I feel like he did the only thing he really could do in that moment because like people are saying in the chat, Maddie wasn't really sure what Brandon found, but it looked like she was aware he put something in his pocket. And he could have played it off, so like, I didn't find anything, whatever. He could have maybe like stepped on it and like turned out his pockets inside out and says, I don't have anything. He could have gotten away with it. But once he was like, you know what, I'm going to come clean and talk to her. This is what Steven says. Like, great, you're building trust between two people. You're sharing some information. Granted, I don't think you should share anything, but it builds that bond. The problem is that, and they wanted to work together initially, Maddie said, but then when she wanted to keep it a secret and he wanted to tell other people, they were like, we can't work with each other anymore. I think Brandon made the right move because at that point, once Maddie knows that it's a key to the cage, and granted, they haven't opened it up yet, I think he's got to just tell people, because at this point, if he doesn't tell people, she controls the narrative. I think he wanted to control the narrative and say, hey, we found it. This is a new twist to Survivor. Let's open this up together. Oh, I thought it was rice for the tribe. Oh, it's actually an idol. Oh, I didn't know that. Like, granted, that put a target on his back, but now that he's played it immediately, I hope that got the target off of his back now. But at that point, if you let Maddie control the narrative and go back to camp and say, Brandon found something, he put it in his pockets, he didn't want to tell you guys. Like, Maddie could lie and say he didn't want to tell you guys when secretly he actually did. So, like, I think he wanted to get out in front of the story.
Yeah, I do get that aspect. Also, let's be honest, it ended up working out all right for him. Like, he saved himself, he got Maddie out, and now he doesn't have the target on his back of having an idol. Like, I think that's the best thing that happens. Like, if everyone knows you have an idol and you just get rid of it, especially in this new era, that's probably the best thing that could happen. That being said, like, it does hurt that, like, he can't use that fake idol later in the game, even if he's talking to other tribe members, unless this tribe gets, like, whittled down so much to the point where, like, Brandon ends up being with, like, one or two other players at the merge, and they keep that secret of the fake idol, then, like, I feel like he can't play it on other people. Plus, they're probably gonna have the same thing, so it's that whole thing again where, like, the other tribes are gonna start to catch on about that this idol's fake, this idol's real. So it all becomes like tough, but we'll see what happens with it. Let's get to the Advantage Island. So the journey happens. Journey that we've had pretty much every single premiere in the new era. And look, it was a game of chance, and we can break down the math here, right? So you have to draw into a bag, okay? And let's just recap. It was Sarah who went for Tika. It was Lauren who went for Ratu, and it was
Matt.
Okay, and Matt went, right. So they had to draw the bag, and there was 3 notes in there. They had to draw it, right? So one note gives you the advantage. The other 2 notes say that you can't vote at the next tribal council. However, if you get that you can't vote the first time, you could draw again to get the advantage. But if you don't get it a second time, then you end up not voting at the next 2 tribal councils. I'm sure, I haven't looked at his Twitter yet. I'm sure Christian Hubicki could break down the entire math of this on his Twitter or on some there's probably math behind it. I'm pretty sure if I'm doing the mental math in my head correctly, even if you don't get it the first time, the move is absolutely to draw it again, because I'm pretty sure the odds are that. And again, if there are better mental math people in the comments, you can let me know. I'm pretty sure that the odds are that if you don't get it the first time and then draw it again, you will probably get it the second time, but I don't know. Maybe it's just an equal chance. I don't know. It seems like it's the right move to draw twice.
Yeah. Look, first of all, can I just say that I hated this? Maybe that's a hot take. Okay. I don't like that they were forced to draw, because I don't like in Survivor, and maybe this is me being an old head, maybe this is me being an old school fan and not liking new stuff, but I don't like when they eliminate choice. I think choice is so important. Choice in the game of Survivor opens up more options and lets people it's just the essence of Survivor. It's kind of like why we don't like forced fire making, because you eliminate the choice, you eliminate the vote at Final Four, and the vote is one of the most important things that you have. And in terms of math, I mean, if you do the math, you have a 66% chance to lose your vote, and you don't have a choice. And in a tribe of 6, early on, you lose your vote. We saw, even though Chanel made it to the merge in 42, that whole situation destroyed her game. Like no one could trust her really after that at all. So if I was forced to draw and I lost my vote, I also would be curious to know what the percentages are, but I wouldn't draw again if I lost, because to not have my vote at my first 2 tribal councils, if I'm in a spot where we go to tribal council a lot and the numbers are dwindling and things change in Survivor day after day, especially in a 26-day game, I can't risk, like Matt did, I can't risk not having my vote twice in a row, because you could really be up a creek at that point. So I don't like that it's forced. And I feel like if I didn't get it, I would just give up at that point. And it's ironic. We saw all 3 situations of this. We saw Matt fail twice. We saw Sarah fail once, but then get it. And then we saw Lauren get it on the first try. So,
okay. So just to clear things up, and again, I'm not even sure. And here's one of the issues with this episode. If there were, again, I thought it was a great premiere. This was all a little bit confusing. Like I think if you're a casual viewer, you got to really like. It was hard for me to follow, and I was literally texting with my brother, and we were still trying to figure it out. I'm sure like it's still not completely clear what everything is. I'm sure that there were pictures floating around with the exact wording and stuff. Yep. We went over Lauren's thing. We saw her use it. We understand that. Okay, Sarah's advantage that she got. At first I was like, whoa. And now I'm like thinking about it more, and I'm like, well, I don't know. Is it overpowered? Is it not overpowered? Is it hard to use? Like, I can't really figure it out. And I think it all depends on like what the exact wording is of how to use it. And I don't know if you knew that, if that's been cleared up, but if you want to possibly get into that.
Yeah. So we had 2 advantages in this situation. We had the inheritance advantage and the bank of vote. We saw the bank of vote, of course, which simply is that you don't vote at one tribal and then you get that second vote in the future, which is a lot less strong than the inheritance advantage. I mean, obviously Lauren got the worst of the 2. It's a worse extra vote essentially. And the inheritance is extremely, extremely strong. The way I understand it from what Dalton Ross has said and other people have asked Jeff about is, and maybe Jeff will go into it next week on the podcast, because I think he said on the podcast next week, he'll go into some idols and advantage stuff, but it sounds like it sounds like it works like the idol nullifier. When you go to vote, you have to put the inheritance trinket, whatever it's called, put that in the urn. So you're basically saying to Jeff, if any idol or advantage gets played during this vote, I will claim it after the vote happens. So if an idol gets played, and that was the other question people were saying, does it negate the thing being played? The idol or advantage gets played as it would normally, and then after tribal council, it goes back into the pocket of the inheritance person with all of its full power. So for example, if let's just use this week, for example, if Kane played his inheritance advantage and Brandon played his idol, Maddie still goes home, but then Brandon's idol would have gone back into Kane's pocket right after that. So that's how it essentially works. So it's not as overpowered as it could have been. It's not like Sarah stands up and says at advantage get, and I want all of your idols, and she gets 3 idols at once. Like, it's not that powerful. Right. You still have to know when to use it, but just like the nullifier.
At first when she first read it, I thought that like everyone could get up and play an idol, and then she could be like, I'm using this. That would have been crazy. So
That's broken.
This makes it a little bit. I think I actually like this now. I'm changing tune a little bit. I think I like it, right? Because you have to know, in order for you to use this successfully, it's kind of like knowledge is power, but not knowledge is power. And by the way, hopefully that doesn't come back. We'll see. We'll see if it comes back. But like, you have to know that an idol is coming out the season. Like, you have to know that vote. You have to know that somebody's using an idol or using an advantage. So you have to know where the idols or advantages are before the tribal council and who's using it. So I think I like it. If it's used correctly, it could really be a little bit overpowering, but I think it would take it would take a huge amount of skill. For somebody to pull off an overpowered version of this. But given the fact that so many people are freaking sharing everything these days,
yeah,
it is worrisome that Sarah could end up with like 4 advantages after one tribal council.
It's not as bad as it could be. I agree. I still think it's really strong, because you could also argue, well, the nullifier is not that strong because you have to know when someone's going to play an idol, and you have to declare who it's going to be on. It's not like you can just say with the nullifier, all idols played are canceled. You have to say, okay, Dan or Janet are playing their idols, and then that cancels it. That being said, Nullifier is still 2 for 2. Like, I still think when you have an advantage like this, because of how much people talk and and I think you pick up on when people get certain vibes, and like if someone declares they're going to play it, or if somehow this can be carried into like the final 6 or 7 and like it's the last night you can use something. I still think it's extremely strong, especially because it's not like you just cancel one idol like the Nullifier. If multiple idols get played, you get everything. I still think it's extremely strong, so I don't love it, but it could have been worse.
Right. So we'll see what Sarah could pull off, but if she has an incredible social game, then it's going to be interesting to watch. But let's get to the immunity challenge. We don't have to talk too much about this. I want to kind of use this time to talk about like the Green Tribe, the Soka Tribe, since we haven't really spoke about them yet.
Yeah.
I saw people talking about this in the comments, and we predicted this in the preview. They're not going to lose. Like I don't see how they lose. They are completely. I want to say they're stronger than everybody, and they just seem more athletic and more just better. We predicted this, and we literally I said I don't think they're going to lose. So again, I hope that I wish there would be a tribe swap at some point before pre-merge. I don't think we're going to end up getting that, but nope. Yeah. I think Soka is, if you look at them, we didn't really get to see anything of Josh, but I'm pretty sure is a personal trainer. Am I wrong about that?
Well,
he's a doctor, but we were saying that we would have predicted him to be a personal trainer because he looks like he's very fit. Right. So he's clearly athletic. Danny looks like very strong based on what we've seen. We haven't seen too much of him, but seems pretty strong. And then they also have, a bunch of other athletes on that. I remember Heidi in her bio was saying that she played a ton of sports. And I'm pretty, Claire didn't play this challenge. I'm kind of blanking out on who else. Okay. Then there's Franny and Matt, and Matt's pretty athletic. Seems like he could hold his own at least in challenges also.
And Matt also led them in the slide puzzle. So they're the most well balanced. Right. Like they have a lot of physical people, and they're also very inclined with puzzles. Whereas Purple Tika has a lot of great puzzle people like Carson and Helen, not the strongest tribe. So I think Green is easily the most well balanced, which is why we said they weren't going to lose. Speaking of Claire, because Claire did sit out. Dylan, I love this. I love this from Claire. People have been saying for a long time, and maybe they just don't show it on the show, but people are saying, why don't we get a lot of cross-tribe interactions, either before the challenge, during the challenge, or after? Because in Australian Survivor, which, by the way, I've been watching the Heroes versus Villains season. I said this to Dylan, by the way. If you're not watching Australian Survivor Heroes versus Villains, you're missing out. It's one of the best seasons I've seen in a very long time. It's insane. But they talk after almost every challenge, and they talk all the time. And I love the cross-tribal dynamics that happen and how certain people blow up certain people's games. Because Claire basically blew up Lauren's game in a way without even realizing it. So I wish more people would do this. But basically, Claire goes to Matthew on the sidelines, and she's like, psst, hey, did the person that go to Advantage Island, did they show you your notes, or did they get it? And Matthew was like, well, she told us she lost her votes. I mean, I guess we believe her, but that's what she told us. And Claire goes, well, Matt on our team went, and he showed us a note. Did they show you their note? And Matthew's like, she didn't show us a note. Interesting. And now that led to Brandon and Matthew possibly looking to target Lauren here. And then at the end, Claire's like, I like you. We should work together. Like I love this from Claire just to begin with, and I think Claire will be great this season. But I just want more cross-tribal dynamics.
I literally was like almost unaware that like you could talk to each to each other.
My sister texted me. She goes, "Are they allowed to do that?" I'm like,
"Yeah." I texted my brother. I was like, "Wait." I was like, "Are they even allowed to do?" Because we just haven't seen it. So I was like thinking, I was like, we haven't seen that, right? So. That, again, they could have just not been showing it, but that was really cool to see. I am a huge fan of Claire. I'm like very, very big fan of her. Yeah. I'll be rooting for this season, so we'll have to see what happens there. But I would say she's off to a good start, in my opinion, because that was pretty funny to see.
In case people didn't see, that was the other secret scene of the week. So nothing like too crazy or spoilery, but Claire basically on the Green Tribe, we see early on, we didn't cover this because Green they didn't lose. They were kind of quiet tonight, but Matt and Franny, which we'll see what happens with the preview, but Matt and Franny make an alliance because they want to work together, being, similar and nerdy. But in the secret scene, Claire seems to make an alliance with Franny, and make an alliance with Matt. I don't know if it's a 3-person alliance or if they're just 2 different pairs of 2, but Claire basically seems to be positioning herself well on green. And this is why I really like Claire. She points out, like, she doesn't say any names, but she basically says, look, I want to play hard because I came out here to play hard, but I really have to be mindful, as Adam Klein says, like, to lower my threat level and not peak too early. Because she says a lot of big players in this new era, she says they peak right before the end and they don't make it. So I need to play a strong game. However, I cannot peak too early. So obviously she's talking about the Shans, the Ricards, the Omers, the Jessies, etc. But like, I think one episode in, I think Claire has the chops to be able to be that person who can play a under the radar game, but be very dominant as well, hopefully.
Yeah, I agree. I have high hopes for her. Anything else before we get to questions?
Let's see. I'm looking at we had a lot in our notes here. I'm trying to think. We covered the advantages, the challenges. We covered some of the nerdy stuff. I mean, I guess the only thing I would say, Dylan, is that I wish we saw, and granted, this happens in the first episode of the new era with all the challenges and advantages. We just don't get to see a lot of the people a lot. I did enjoy some of the character moments, though. And this is why I think this is going to be a great cast. I think Jeff said this cast is great. He kind of threw shade on 43 and said that was an anomaly. We got this one right. But he likes this cast, and I can see why. I think there's a lot of fun characters like Yam Yam and Matthew and everything. I mean, Carson gained 30 pounds to come out here. Like, what do you say? Carson was like 115 and now he's like 140 something. So Carson put on 30 pounds. Carolyn is basically like Nora 2.0. Carolyn is crazy out there. Heidi started the fire. So, I mean, I think there was a lot of small little character moments, and I hope we see even more of those next week.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. Interesting you brought up the point about Jeff throwing shade on 43. Look, we get to questions, but I personally, I liked 43 a lot. I've spoke to how I didn't necessarily agree with the winner pick, but that doesn't always necessarily indicate whether I'll like a season or not. I thought the cast was good for 43. So if Jeff really likes 44, then I have high hopes. So we'll see what happens.
I will say, Jay pointed this out. One thing I forgot to mention before we get to questions is the other strategy piece that we did see post Bruce's medevac. We did see a threesome of Carson, Sarah, and Helen pop up. So it looks like right now on purple, Yam Yam and Carolyn would be on the outs. And Carolyn even pointed out, like, people aren't coming up to me. That makes me nervous. Should I go up to people? Should I not? It's an interesting question. But we did see after Bruce left, it looks like Carson and the girls, not Carolyn, seem to make a 3-person group.
Speaking of that, and we haven't mentioned her too much, I'm a huge fan of Helen also. So I think
Me too.
Yeah. All right, let's get to questions. So I'm scrolling through here, and Ryan, you could scroll through also. And if you see any before me, then we could go right there. All right. Let's see. Trying to see something.
While we're looking for questions, Dylan, I don't know if you saw this from Marianne's interview with Rob, but do you know about the curse of the M's?
The curse of the M's? I don't think so.
So and this is, I think this has actually been proven except for like 1 or 2 exceptions, but like 99% of the time or 95% of the time, apparently any female in a new player season that starts with an M, I guess they go out first. And that happened to Mariah last season. That happened to Mariah the season before. So ironically, I was like, oh crap, Maddie's in danger, but I didn't even realize that. Yeah, I don't see a lot of questions at the top. I'm kind of going down here. I'm looking for any other comments.
Yeah. So, okay. This is it. So this goes back to our question about Savvy versus Sweat. Yeah, they need to change it. What would be a good switcheroo for Savvy Sweat? Jay says, honestly, I don't know. But they didn't always have Savvy or Sweat. So I don't necessarily mind, going back to just going right to camp, maybe without, like, obviously they play for rewards. So maybe you just send them right back to camp with, like, some, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what it is.
You know what it is? I just still go back to the thought process. And again, I try to be fair. I try to balance my old school and new school mindset. And I try to find, like, what's the best way for the show to go forward. I just feel like you don't need it. I just feel like you don't need that much. I feel like all you need is the characters. If you have a great cast, I say just let them shine. Just let them cook. I just let them play. You don't need to have Advantage Island. You don't need to have Savvy or Sweat. Like, again, Australian Survivor this recent season, there's no advantages. It's just literally regular idols, and that's it. And you just let the people play. So I don't even think you need another type of Savvy or Sweat. I think at 45, and let's pretend for the sake of argument, they don't do returnees yet. Let's just say with Bruce and stuff, they make 46 returnees and they get like another one last cast of all newbies. You get like 18. What is it? Like you could do like 18 times 5. You say, okay, we are going to have a pool of 90 people to pick from, let's just say. For 46, just give them idols and that's it. Like you don't need to keep evolving it in different ways. Like the show will still be very interesting, but we'll see.
Okay, here's a good question. This is pretty funny. UNC Andre wants to know if Sarah gets an idol, plays the idol, and the inheritance advantage in the same tribal, does she get her idol back?
If it's not in the rules, then yes. If it doesn't say in the parchment, like note, it can't be any of your stuff. As long as this doesn't say that, that's the big brain play right there.
That is interesting, and I have not thought about that, but that is a big brain play for sure. I like that.
If I had to guess, I mean, yeah, Jay does say like, doesn't it say like all advantages played? I'm guessing that's correct. I would like to see a copy of the parchment where it says like at the bottom, except for ones that you play, but I guess we'll see. This is why I said to you in the new era, they should just have a URL link at the bottom of the screen when an advantage pops up and just give us a link to a page where we can read what the note says. Because now we have to play detective and kind of go back and try to look for where the notes are and like what the rules are. So,
all right, we got another question from Ohio State for the win here. He says, who impressed you most in the premiere and who impressed you least? I would say the most impressive was probably Helen for me, right? I think every time she came on the screen, I was like, she knows what she's doing. She's very good socially. She was good at the puzzle. She solved the savvy. Like I was like very, very impressed with Helen. So I would say probably her. And then least impressive, that's tough to say because I think things could change on a dime. I feel like it would have to be like it's tough for me to say Brandon because he saved himself with the idol, but like also like he put himself in that spot. But like I was not too impressed with him.
Yeah, so I actually have different answers in this. So it's kind of interesting because it's the first episode, so we can go wherever with this. I love Helen. From her bio, I just feel like we didn't see enough of her other than her performance on the Savvy challenge. Because on the puzzle, I guess she was the caller, so she did a great job in the challenges. For me, I have two answers for this. I think Claire impressed me the most because I think Claire, and I wish we saw that secret scene of her building those bonds instead of some other stuff, but Claire is already building bonds, which is great early on, putting herself in a majority or at least 3 out of 6. And the fact that she tried to make a cross-tribal bond with Matthew and also get information on their tribe's dynamics with the advantage. I love that from Claire. So Claire impressed me the most. I'll give one other answer and I'll say, I think even though Lauren kind of got her spot blown up by Claire a little bit, I was very impressed with Lauren's mind for the game. Because not only did Lauren try to lie a little bit about the idol, and I always say with the Advantage Island, like you can't lie too much because people can call your bluff if they go to the island themselves and they see like what's out there. She gave them like a half truth, half lie. And I think she did pretty good there until Claire kind of blew up her spots. However, the other thing that impressed me about Lauren was that apparently did you catch that like she was the one who like filled the bag with rocks that they picked. So she stacked the box.
Yeah.
So I would say Claire impressed me the most. And then Lauren had, I think, a good mind for the game. So I'll say those two. And unfortunately, and I think the internet's going to kill me here, I think Carolyn impressed me the least, not only because she had a really bad challenge performance in the first reward challenge, but Carolyn also is already on the outs. And if people either like Yam Yam more or Yam Yam is better in the challenges, Carolyn is easily the next one to go. So I would say Carolyn for the least.
Yeah, I think you make good point. By the way, Helen, we got less of strategy wise in terms of like Lauren I thought was extremely impressive as well, right? I'll say like I honestly like I'm not looking at a list right in front of me, so it's off the top of my head. But yeah, Lauren was very impressive. Claire was very impressive. And yeah, so I agree with you there. And now, so this is another question that I think multiple people asked, so I'm going to go to it next. Multiple people have this. So last question I have for both of you from Ohio State. He says, who do you think is in the biggest trouble for each of the tribes after the first episode? What do you think, Ryan?
Good question. I mean, it's tough after only one episode because things can change. I mean, we can go back to any number of seasons and say, oh, this person's fine. And then next episode, like, oh, here's a perfect example. I was going to go back into Survivor history. Let's just look at last season. If you told me after NECA got voted out in episode 3, if you told me, oh, Lindsay's the next one out in episode 4, I would have said, what did Lindsay do wrong? Like, why is Lindsay in trouble? It would be Gio. And then Lindsay went completely paranoid in that episode. So it's so hard to tell. But as of right now, I will say Kane is in trouble on Orange just because he's the only person who wrote Brandon's name down that's still there. And he was aligned with Maddie. So Kane could be in trouble. Maybe Jamie. I would say Kane or Jamie for Orange. Purple, Carolyn. I think that's pretty clear to me. And Green, that's tough because we really didn't see Green that much. I mean, I could throw a dart and I could just say I predict the next person to go to the island, whether it's Josh or Heidi, that person will be the next target on that group. That's my guess, but I don't know.
So I don't think we've got a lot from Green to give us that info because we got the idea. We got the somebody compared this in the chat also. We got the Luvu vibes from them, like everything going great, never gonna lose. So I don't really know if I know for that tribe, but I would say I agree with you. And so in terms of like positioning, Kane is in trouble, but I think it's gonna be Jamie next if I had to predict. Mm-hmm. And then Carolyn, I would also agree, is not in a great spot. But who knows?
Well, Green, the only thing I will say is that unless something drastic changes up, I do think to answer the question, it would be to me either Josh, Danny, or Heidi, because it sounds like Claire is in good with Franny and Matt. And I think that puts them in the majority. Or tied for majority.
I think let's talk about that quickly because it was in the preview. So we'll kind of end on this and any last second questions that come in. Yeah. But clearly seems like there could be some kind of showmance coming between Matt and Franny. I'm wondering if you're Claire, if you're Claire, is that the right place to align yourself? That being said, I think Claire is going to end up being in with everybody. Like I think she's going to be one of those players, so I don't think it'll be an issue. But I'm for sure concerned, especially because I'm pretty high on both Matt and Franny, but like that, it never works. It never works. So we'll see. Maybe people won't see it. Maybe people will say that it's obvious and it's and like they're showmats or they're like a power couple, but like, I don't know. It's impossible to tell based on 5 seconds of, and again, if they never lose in the pre-merge, like I don't think they're going to lose too much. It may not be an issue. So
Dylan, when I tell you Jeff teases up the season and goes, there might be a showmance. I'm like, there's no way. I mean, Survivor showmances don't happen really anymore. I mean, if I can count on one hand Survivor showmances. I can go Rob and Amber. I can go Figgy and Taylor. I can go Ozzy and Amanda. And I could stretch and I could say like, I'm trying to think about who else. Because apparently Jeff was like, oh, Dan and Kara were a showmance in David versus Goliath. I'm like, well, that was really one-sided from Dan's perspective. I don't think Kara was interested at all. And so, I mean, they don't happen that often, the showmances. But then again, when they do work, they can go pretty far. I think it's no problem if she wants, if Matt and Franny seem to be a showmance or they seem to be very close. I think Claire wants to team up with them because I feel like you're not the target in that spot. Like even with Figgy and Taylor, like Adam was aligned with them and he actually ended up being the swing vote because Ken and Jessica wanted to take out Figgy. So if Matt and Franny are a very obvious pair, and I hope for their sake they don't make it obvious, Claire would be like, well, I'll just buddy up with them because one of them will get booted. And if I stick with them and they keep power, it's a 3-person block. So I don't see why Claire wouldn't want to work with the showmance possibly.
That is a good point you make, right? It could end up being the swing vote. And like Millennials Gen X, that did happen. But I think we could wrap up here.
I have one more thing, Dylan, by the way. One last thing. So it's not a question, but I saw this on Twitter and I wish I took a picture of it to see who tweeted it out to give them credits. So first of all, by the way, can we just mention the theming this season? The castle theming, the Sword and Shield tribal idol, the castle at Tribal Council. I love the medieval theming this season. I think it's really cool. What I wanted to bring up to you, unless you had a quick thought on that.
Oh no. I think it's cool. Also, I was just
I don't know if it'll come through on the podcast, but if you looked at the voting booth, there is, I don't know if you can see, there's a chessboard at Tribal Council. Now, someone in the chat was like, when are they going to have an Adam Klein idol when they hide an idol right at Tribal Council, like Adam once did in Winners at War? People were pointing out this because like a giant chessboard is at the podium. Someone was like, and I wish I saw this person on Twitter. I think I can give them credit. Someone was like, what if one of the pieces is like the king is an actual idol, or if you like checkmate the king, you get an idol. Like, I think it's so weird that there's a chessboard at the, do you find that weird at all or no?
Maybe it's just the medieval theme. I don't know, but I think it is an open opportunity. And again, you could listen to Jeff's podcast, but he also spoke about the tribal council set, and he's like, the set for this season is amazing. He's like, you'll see how like he's like later in the season, like you'll see how the set comes into play or something like that. He didn't. I don't know. He didn't necessarily phrase it that way. I'm just like how I interpreted it, I should say.
Right.
But he said something like, you'll see as the season goes on how amazing it is, or something like that. And how, he said something like that I thought was like a little bit of a weird comment. Maybe I'm just overreading it, but look, the chessboard was interesting, and I was thinking about that, and they made sure they showed it last night in the, like, they showed Kane, I think, looking down. He was like, this is sick, like whatever, and like, so I don't know. We'll see what happens with it.
That'd be cool.
But yeah. Thank you, everybody, for watching live. We had a ton of comments tonight, maybe close to a record, honestly. So thank you, everybody, for interacting. Really appreciate it. We will be back next week, likely on Thursday once again. We'll let everybody know on timing there. But once again, thank you, everybody. Be sure to like the video on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really, really helps us out. Fill the comments with any questions you have. And yeah, that's about it.
One episode down, about 12 or 13 more to go. Grab your torches and head back to camp.
Good night.